Welcome back to Q-Dads, guys. It's me, Ben, and yes, episode 9, the penultimate one of our season 2 rewatch. We're not far away from the end now. And in this one, we learn about Demoiselle and how she's came about. And again, as I said in my previous episode, I've actually got a real interesting theory for this. So let's waste no time and dive straight in. Hit that subscribe button, guys. I'll really appreciate it. And if you don't do it for me, do it for Empire. So I'm going to talk about Demoiselle and Cleon's story here in one go. So we start the episode off essentially with Cleon the First, but as a young boy, not knowing that his parents were the last of the Eton dynasty. And all this narration here is done by Cleon the First, which is a nice change. And this actually means that all of this story is not known to Gale at all. Throughout the whole first and second season, she has done all of the narration to different parts of the stories. But yet this is done specifically by Cleon the First, meaning that she does not know this information still. And I thought that was a nice touch. Now, we learn about Demoiselle's origins and that she was first discovered within this secret stairwell, which is almost like a prison, and she's been laid there thousands of years in these thin slices of glass essentially. And then she tells some nice stories about her origins to this young Dawn for comfort. And we then move forward to a little bit later and we get a more cynical looking Dawn. Now this version of Dawn is not like the versions we've seen. This one seems very resentful, and of course we know that his parents have just died, but ultimately this version isn't quite what we're used to. And she mentions here about planet Earth, in which was her home world and where the robot wars started, and that actually she was a leader of the soldiers and lost the battle before then being taken captive by Emperor Aberanus, who puts her in prison. And then later on we see Day talking to her, and he's actually the one that puts her together after spending 5,000 years frozen. And obviously the stories she tells today are a little bit more erotic and obviously connect to Day and his character and personality. And it's less about curiosity like we did with Dawn and more about intrigue from Day's point of view. And then of course we get Dusk, who is the most curious, with the most changing for them. And he comes with a box of tools which he has tracked down from Earth, which of course is somewhat a very old box considering the age of Demoiselle. But this does make me question, how did he retrieve this box? Because it's not really mentioned, anywhere throughout the series about Earth. Sal's dad mentions it at one point talking about the brief history of it. But surely if Earth is a pinnacle point for this whole story of Foundation and the robot wars themselves, potentially the birthplace of Demoiselle, then should it not be more central to the galaxy? As now we're on Trantor, which is considered to be the epicenter, the heart as they call it. But why not Earth? Surely if it's easy enough for Dusk to head to Earth and retrieve the box, then surely there's civilization there? Or are we saying that Earth is all in ruins and he had to go and salvage from what was left? But what if a third Foundation is further down the line and is actually on Earth, a secret safe haven for Harry and all of his Foundationers? Imagine that it's some kind of dumping ground or abandoned planet, derelict because of the robot wars. But what if it's not? And what if it is all a facade and secretly there's a whole civilization there that again Dusk did not know, and now Harry and the future Foundationers are surviving on Earth? Is that what's happening? I don't know, I'm just speculating here, but I'm just very curious to how he retrieved that box. But anyway, of course, he repairs her, and with that one moment of freedom that she had, she didn't do anything. But she does mention that the first law of robotics used to be the case to not harm humans, and she says the words used to be, meaning that that is no longer a law. But of course, Dusk alters her programming, meaning that she now has to obey Empire at all costs and cannot harm him, meaning that when she grows over time to love Empire, but at the same time always has that hatred for him. And this is why she has to keep them alive, the clones, for an eternity, because if she doesn't and she lets them die, she will then become trapped again, ultimately rust and fade away. Now, it turns out that Cleon the First says the reason they have a dusk, dawn and day is because it triples their love for Demoiselle. Oh, touching. But now we jump over to Ignis, and this is where we see Tellenbond battling with Sal as she throws some of the devices down, altering the frequency of the mentalics around her and allowing her to free Gale with a cheeky little slap, which again, thought was brilliant.
Gale! Gale!
And then we move toward the beggar as Sal begins to fight Loren, who is continually switching between himself and Hugo, trying to mess with Sal's mind. And just because it's a TV show, they threw in some rain to make the fight scene better, which I thought was very weird. You know, the fight scene was good on its own. They didn't need to have rain. I felt like it was a real cheap gimmick just to make the fight look a bit better. I mean, it worked, but it was just very noticeable and I didn't think it was needed in that moment. And then, out of nowhere, we get to see Harry come from behind, hit Tellenbond as he saves Sal and Gale, and ultimately bludgeons her to death. Now, Gale and Tellenbond were having this mental fight around the future where they saw the mule and the fear and Tellen pretending to be Gale's dad in the Prime Radiant. So there's so much going on. But yeah, very brutal that Harry did that. But it does make me ask the question, where did Harry come from? And again, I'll touch on about this on the last episode, but in this moment, I was ultimately confused. And to be fair, I still am a little bit around the whole series of events with Tellenbond. And you do question at what point did Harry's journey start and Harry's journey end. But again, we'll be touching on that in the final episode as it is all revealed. Now, the third part of this really was all about Hobe and Mallow, as he was tagged by a spacer, which allowed him, and Belrios to track them down. Now, Empire essentially comes onto the ship outside of Terminus and makes a bit of a speech about him choosing peace and decides to go down to the planet himself. Now, this is where it leads him into the Church of Selden and realises that actually it's a factory for making weapons and devices. And here he forces Polly, in a bit of a touching moment, to turn iron into gold, which he does a great job of doing and a great speech, so I admire Polly for that. But of course, Empire finds the stash of personal auras and orders the Invictus to be brought down on the planet itself. Now before they do, Empire can't resist but to go into the vault himself. He takes off all of his armour and his personal aura and meets with Harry, who is turning a little bit greyer than I expected. But of course they all enter the vault and end up having a conversation, which I must say at this point is targeted a lot more towards Demoiselle, as he encourages her to take the Prime Radiant, which they do, but Harry's almost trying to convince her that there's a greater good to all of this, which is why I have a little bit of a theory where Demoiselle could use the Prime Radiant in Season 3, and again, through the quantum device, go back to the past, when Harry first invented it, and pose as Calais within the Radiant to make Harry get to where he needs to be, ultimately starting off his journey and ensuring the overall plan happens. Bit of a long shot, but it's a nice thought. But anyway, they leave and head back to the ship. Pellis 1 is then taken down after beating the Invictus, but essentially Glaywin is then hit and falls down to the planet himself. Now this leaves Bell in a very tricky position as he has to make a decision about bringing the Invictus down to the planet, which in fact he does, and all of this is because Hobermello brought a ship to his planet, so now he's doing the same in a very barbaric response. But before he does, Demoiselle gives us a great line.
You're a sperm led by its waving flagellum, mistaking its render motion for complexity.
And again for me, this just highlights the humour. Every now and then in this show we get a subtle one-liner that isn't meant to really be standout funny, but it just makes me chuckle loads. But of course the episode ends with Terminus being destroyed, ripped apart by the spinning Invictus, taking pretty much the whole planet, turning it inside out as chunks of it start to float away. And of course, Polly and the rest of the Foundationers, again, are no more. Or are they? So we'll wrap up season 2, killing off some of the main characters, Becky, Holly, Glaywin. But, you know, as we'll find out in the next episode, it's only actually Becky that dies. Oh, let's share another moment, guys.
It's Becky's arsehole.
But that's it. Over to you. I've got one more episode left and then we jump into season 3 and I cannot wait. So as always, guys, hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching and I'll catch you next time with something new.